Hello! Happy Friday. Welcome to an SJU review double feature. First, we're talking about the new Seth Rogen movie out on HBO Max, American Pickle. And then if you stick around to the end, we will probably more briefly but enthusiastically talk about this new movie on Shudder called Host that none other than the inimitable Eric Goldman introduced me to. Welcome, Eric.
Hello, thanks for having me. Can I correct you though, Spencer? It's an American pickle, which I keep forgetting as well, by the way, which
An
is why I typed
American
it.
Pickle. So much more fancy that way.
It
And
does,
I
right?
also would be remiss if I did not talk about the Fandom 5 trivia that we're doing on Avatar: The Last Airbender next Friday, the 14th. So click the link in the description to sign up, get a notification when it's live, and you will win $650 if you know your shit about Avatar. Sorry, I already cursed. But nevertheless, we are talking about an American Pickle today. And I guess I will start with a light spoiler alert, if that's the kind of thing you care about. Spoilers in your broad comedies. I don't think this is a particularly spoilerable movie. Do you, Eric?
No, not really. I mean, first, we won't talk about the ending, but I mean, the premise is the premise, and that's kind of like where the movie goes, and it's not trying to have twists and turns along the way.
Yeah, and if you're not fully up to speed, the premise of American Pickle is Heschel Greenbaum is a man working in a shtetl in Schlupsk, and he falls into a vat of pickle brine where he's preserved for 100 years perfectly, and then he's unfrozen or unpickled, so to speak, and moves in with his last surviving relative, who is his great grandson Ben. Both roles played by Seth Rogen. And it is this old-timey Eastern European Jewish man living with his hipster Brooklynite, a religious descendant, and comedy ensues. Or does it? Eric, what do you think of the movie?
I liked it. It was a gentle, I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say I loved it. Like, I like Seth Rogen in general. Like, I think he makes a lot of really good movies. I don't think this is top tier Rogen. But it was enjoyable. It was mostly gentle laughs. Once in a while, I'd have a bigger laugh. There's some things where I kind of think that they, took some shortcuts on that felt a little strange. But overall, I enjoyed my time with it. It is a movie that feels at home on a streaming service. Has it ended up?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm right there with you, Eric. I counted the number of times I laughed out loud, which was 6.5, and that's good. That's good for me. It's not the most uproarious comedy you've ever seen, but it's also going for a lot more sweetness and heart than I think people were expecting. This could have very much been an Encino Man. And I don't mean that as an insult. I just mean something that was more played more broadly and more directly for laughs. But I think that the first act and the third act are really going for pathos and this real emotional connection between this man who's lost his family and is trying to connect. On Heschel's trying to connect with his son, and his son trying to connect with his grief over losing his parents, which is that's heavy stuff for a comedy. This is based on a short story by Simon Rich, who's of SNL and Man Seeking Woman, which was a show I loved on FX, too short lived. But I read the short story, and I got to recommend for anyone watching to please read his collections of short stories. It's from one called Spoiled Brats, and this is like, talk about laughing out loud. I die laughing reading his work, and that is an insanely hard thing to do. Not just for me, but just writing in general, just reading a book that makes you laugh out loud. So I was super excited for this, and there were some changes. Not to be the book is better than the movie guide, but I think that they made some alterations that took away from.
Are you a purist? Are you an American Pickle purist?
American Pickle purist. I hate to say it. The biggest change being that Ben Greenbaum in the short story has a live-in girlfriend, and there was this kind of tension between this unsuccessful relationship he was in and the arrival of his great-grandfather to live with them, and that caused this interesting dynamic. Whereas this film was really just Seth Rogen. There are largely no other characters in this movie.
Yeah, that actually really stuck out to me, is that, like, there's not a supporting cast per se. I guess the intern girl at one point. There's Herschel's wife in the very beginning, and there's this intern character who's there for a little bit. But it was strangely like it was a very small scale movie. And it's interesting that it is interesting to me to learn that there was that other character, because it almost felt like it was missing that. But at the same point to what you're saying, like it is more of like a dramatic comedy per se. Like I think one thing about the Seth Rogen, I should also mention Evan Goldberg, because obviously they're producing partners and they do all their stuff together. They certainly, even in their broad comedies, they like to have like some, moment of actual like character connection. Like even something like Neighbors, it's like, what's going on with these characters? This one, I think, leans a little more into that sort of emotional pathos drama side of things. And that's not to say there's anything bad about that. But yeah, it was. I guess I think people's expectations should be that it's sort of small scale, and it is very contained to these two characters. Who, by the way, Seth Rogen, I think, does a very good job playing both of them as very distinct characters. And we're in 2020 in a place where it is worth noting how good effects are at putting the same actor in the scene together, where you just stop thinking about it after a little while.
True. Yeah, that illusion was never broken. And I do think that the director, who I think is a first-time director for a feature, at least, Brandon Trost? I don't know. He did, I think he did fantastic, not just balancing that effect and directing the performances, but it had like a nice kind of Wes Anderson-ish look to it. It wasn't shot like most other comedies, which is like a TV show.
Yeah.
It actually managed to look like a movie.
Yeah.
And I do think, Seth Rogen's performance was fantastic. I think as Heschel, I think that did it veer sometimes into Borat territory, perhaps, when he keeps talking about how he's going to do violence to you.
Right,
All he was missing was the mustache.
Sure.
But I do think that he really managed to convey the pain and the sweetness that was in this character that maybe a lesser actor couldn't. I'm surprised that he can completely carry a movie in a dual role. I guess I should expect that by now, but I was still surprised by his performance.
Yeah, no, I thought he was very good, especially because, once, like you said, once in a while they lean a little more into the parody aspects. For the most part, though, he plays it very real. And because Seth Rogen is such a distinct persona, who Ben is, Ben is like modern day Seth Rogen laugh character. But then with Herschel, he's getting to play something very different that I think he plays very, real 90% of the time. And then I do want to mention with the director, because it's his first time as a feature director. He had directed an episode of Future Man, which is another Goldberg-Rogen production, but he has a long list of credits as a cinematographer, including a lot of things with these guys. He did both Neighbors movies. He did This Is the End. He did The Disaster Artist. And I will say, I do like that, Rogen came up as like a Judd Apatow protege. And Judd Apatow obviously did this great job of cultivating talent he found. He found all these young actors who are also writers, and he helped them all kind of get their foot in the door in a big way. And I kind of think it's cool that, Rogen's obviously now doing that himself with him and Evan Goldberg. Their company, by the way, is called Point Grey, which I never remember. They don't have a memorable production company name. You need that. But the point, there is a Point Grey crew. There is obviously a group of actors he works with a lot. And then there's someone like Brandon Trost here who's been working with them for years as a cinematographer, and now he gets to direct his first feature. And like you said, did a great job, and it makes sense given his background that this movie does look really good and does have a distinct visual style that set it apart from that bright and flashy comedy look, generic comedy look.
Yeah. Now one wonders, or one can't help but wonder. While it was impressive for him to pull off the dual role, I wonder if it was what served the story best, because for me, Seth Rogen as Heschel was perfect. Him as Ben, like you said, he seemed like a Seth Rogen, fairly gregarious, friendly guy, which made his turns throughout the movie, and I guess I won't spoil them, but he becomes a very antagonistic force in his great grandfather's life and continuously is derailing it. That seemed kind of shocking to me and kind of at odds with the lovability of Seth Rogen.
Right.
And not to harp on the book, but he is way more of a conniving wiener in the book than he is in the film. He also has a much more pathetic job, which is he's a script doctor who punches up basically Minions movies. He's the person who adds the jokes to Penguin President and Cool Llama and stuff like that. He's way more of a self-loathing hipster than Ben was. So I wonder if either tweaking that character or if that was Jay Baruchel or something like that, if you would buy it more, that he could do these awful things to his great-grandfather.
I feel like I get the idea of casting the same actor because obviously it's this giant like literal, it's obviously being very obvious, literal with the generational divide. That these are two men, same family line, 100 years apart, and look how different they are, but at the same time they have this innate connection. So I get the idea of let's cast the same actor. What you're saying about he does make some big turns that I think could have been a little bit better motivated. This movie's interesting in that I buy into the emotional aspects of it, and I think it does it very well. But it also takes some kind of some shortcuts along the way. I saw someone mentioning online there's a lot of this movie where they convey some big plot points by looking at internet articles or news stories. But then once they get there, they do a really good job with it. And one thing I do want to mention is the entire "this is a man from 100 years ago" idea. There's a very funny joke up front where they deal with the science of that I think is a very funny way to deal with that. I did think it was strange. It was one of the things you have to kind of suspend your disbelief a little more than maybe you should have to, is that once he goes home with Ben, no one talks. He should be incredibly famous. We see it's covered on the news. This is a man from 100 years ago, but it seems almost forgotten to the point that this movie involves him getting some fame from something else he does. And it's almost like people have forgotten. Also, this guy's from 100 years ago. So
the continuity is a little bizarre that he wouldn't be so recognized as you're the 200-year-old man or whatever.
right. So there's
a bit of a suspension of disbelief. And I think that maybe there was some unevenness in the tone. I'm trying to think of other films that maybe Apatow movies blend them more seamlessly of the rapid fire jokes and the heartfeltness. But Seth Rich's or Simon Rich, sorry, way different. Simon Rich's comedic styling is it's really absurdist, and surreal, in the premise, and there's multiple moments where it's cartoonish almost. And then they expect you to kind of whip back to a jokeless, heartfelt scene about losing someone's parents and stuff like that. So maybe the tone could be at odds, and I wish that they had committed to being more silly. Frankly, I've seen reviews already where people are saying, "Oh, it works in the heartfelt family moments, but not so much in the absurdist humor." And it's I love that. I love comedies that aren't afraid to go for laughs, and I wish it had committed more so to that.
Yeah, I agree. I do think it's funny because I think we're both very similar on the same page as far as this movie has some laughs, not huge uproarious throughout, but there's some good laughs. It does the heartfelt stuff really well. It doesn't quite click in as far as going back and forth between the two, which is tricky, but I actually think that we've seen Rogen and Goldberg do this before. I mean, I actually really liked last year Long Shot, the Seth Rogen Charlize Theron movie. Which had literal masturbation jokes mixed with some heartfelt emotional stuff, and I think probably did that a little better, those turns. This movie is good, but it needed a little smoothing out, I think, to sometimes make those transitions.
And to me, what's missing is the other half of the duo. Is you're not getting as much comedy out of Ben as you are of Heschel, and I think that there's such an opportunity to lampoon Brooklyn hipsters. Granted, it's pretty well trod comedic ground, but come on, you can find jokes in an effete hipster who's stuck with a 200-year-old man.
Yeah, it was funny actually bringing up Long Shot one more time. Because Ben I know that Seth Rogen played them both, so they will remind me of each other. But Ben reminded me a little bit of the main character from Long Shot, just at a glance. But I thought that the Long Shot character was a bit more filled out on what his story was. Because I think you're right that we get everything about Herschel. He is the emotional sort of center of this movie, but Ben has some stuff too, but he feels a little more sketchy. It just feels like they didn't quite fill in everything about him, like you said, including the fact that he seems to have some major anger issues based on some of his actions in the film. We get where his pain comes from, but it just feels like he was 2/3 there. They need a little more to fill in.
Why is he funny? Is the question I would ask.
Yeah.
So we still would recommend this movie, I think, right, Eric?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting, by the way, you should mention that, this was a movie, like a lot of movies in 2020, that was produced to be theatrical, but I believe they've even said it was made for Sony, And Sony was like, pretty much, Seth Rogen said, Sony watched it and was like, this isn't for us as a theatrical movie. So even without the pandemic, it probably would have switched distributors. Maybe it would have ended up at an indie studio and still come in theaters, but instead it ended up HBO Max. But
yeah, and it's on HBO Max. It's not an extra $30 charge, so definitely throw it on. It's not a waste of your time. It's only 90 minutes too.
Yes, which I very
90
much...
minutes and 2 characters, not the most to pick apart.
Yes, but we're talking about 2 movies, by the way, today. 2 movies that are 2.5 hours of your life combined, which is kind of amazing these days.
There you go. But we have a lot of comments coming in, so let's maybe read and respond to those. So D.A. Baracus writes, the reviews did not make this look like a broad comedy. And the trailers too, I assume. And that's true, because it is and it isn't. It's not a joke a minute. It's not Anchorman. And yet it is the premise of a guy who falls into a pickle jar and then comes out and has to navigate through modern New York. So it's a broad comedy premise that's played fairly straight.
Yeah, I feel like that joke I mentioned, I'm being vague because I don't want to like give away a joke, but the joke they do at the beginning to explain the science away is almost one of the broader jokes in the movie. Tonally, it is a little different from the rest of the movie as far as what they're doing, because
it is.
Once he's in modern times, it is pretty much treated like, what's he going to do, how he feels, which is why I think they almost forget that he should be an incredibly famous person for given the circumstance.
Totally. So yeah, that and like the that moment where with the scientist, and then that incredibly abbreviated court case. That had the cameo by the I Think You Should Leave guy, who I love. It was
Tim Robinson.
Tim Robinson, thank you.
Thank you.
Those are some of the funnier moments for me. But I wish there was more of that. So Intro Nessia writes, Seth Rogen committing on a proper beard instead of prop ones is nice dedication. I did not realize that. Yeah, well done. That was a real beard?
I wasn't sure, but it looked, if it wasn't real, then I was impressed because it looked so damn good. But then I just thought about how the trickiness of how they shot it then, because he has to play, Ben, who has just hasn't shaved for a couple days, versus Herschel with the giant beard.
That's a quarantine beard if I've ever seen one. That's nice. Prince Apupu writes, this sounds like a movie that has a weird enough premise for me to be interested, even if it doesn't make me laugh. And I think you will laugh. Let's round up to 7. I laughed 7 times, and those are laughs.
Yeah. I was in that place of like, I'm watching it with a smile, and except when it's trying to make me sad, and then I'm like, oh. But then every few minutes I would have a laugh, an audible laugh.
Yeah. Miss Orsa writes, I can easily believe people wouldn't connect him with the old pickle dude. And I disagree, because he's literally selling pickles on the street.
Right. It is very it's like, even if you didn't recognize him, once you see what he's doing, you'd be like, oh yeah.
Oh, you're the pickled guy. Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
It's I guess you're embracing the thing that changed your life so much. Like, you've gone all in on it.
Yeah. Thomas writes, 2020 is so crazy, a time traveler wouldn't make the front page of newspapers. That much is true. We did find out aliens exist, or whatever, UFOs are real, and nobody's really bad to deny.
If this movie was firmly set in our 2020, I do agree with that.
Yeah. All right, and finally, Lisa Martini writes, well, this is off topic, but you know me, I just made soft tacos with pork and black beans, lots of lettuce and tomatoes and lime juice. Very satisfying on a hot summer night.
Well, that sounds delicious, and now I wish I had one.
Did this make you want to eat a pickle, Eric?
I actually hate pickles. I am a bad Jew. I'm not my father's son. That I don't. Who loves pickles? I do not like pickles at all. They're
no pickle for you.
Cucumbers, though. I like cucumbers. Just don't.
Well, I have a horrible secret to reveal to you.
I know. I'm just saying. Once you pickle them, I'm out.
Fair enough. I would recommend Booby's Pickles is the best jarred pickle brand, if that's the kind of thing you're into. I mean, how could it not be? It's called Booby's Pickles.
Well, I'll send Sheldon Goldman to Booby's, and he will enjoy it.
Oh, Sheldon, yes. Got some Booby's Pickles for you.
See, it sounds perfect.
All right. Well, a short review and yet a short film, and we have one more to talk about. But let's pause briefly to tell you that we love you. And thank you so much for being with us every day. Please subscribe for more videos like this, SJU, 100 Reasons to Watch, etc. So hit that like, smash that bell, and you will never miss a thing, including next Friday, not on this YouTube channel, but you will get a link sent to you if you sign up in the description below for our Avatar: The Last Airbender Fandom 5 trivia show to win real money. You could buy Mulan like 20 times if if you know enough about Avatar. So hop on in there and do what you can. And Eric, you're the horror guy. I'm going to kind of let you lead me through this one because this is my first Screenlife horror movie that I've ever seen, called Host. And you probably know more about it than I do, but I definitely liked it a lot. So please give me the background on this film.
So the background, and I'll pimp out an article I actually wrote where I talked to the director of this movie, but I also talked to Amy Acker and Brian Lynch, who have all done stuff from home during this crazy time. But Rob Savage, who made this movie, he's a director. He's done some TV stuff, some shorts, UK-based director, and he did a little viral video. It was a prank on his friends that you may or may not have seen, which is basically he was on a Zoom call with his friends. He said, "Oh, there's some weird noise up in my attic," and he was really pranking his friends because what he'd done is he'd already edited together something where he went up into his attic and he cut in footage from the movie Wreck of the creepy little boy like jumping out of the darkness, and he scared the hell out of his friends. It went viral and it made Shudder go, "Hey, we like this idea of creepy Zoom. We're all stuck at home things. What can you do?" And he came up with this idea, which was a Zoom call gone wrong. In this case, of a group of friends, it is, though they never say COVID-19 or coronavirus, it's clearly set in our reality in our 2020, are doing an online seance and things go horribly wrong. It's mostly his friends in the movie. Most of them were on that prank video. They're working actors who've done stuff like episode of The Crown and whatnot, and which I think speaks to the fact they're all very good. And yeah, they very quickly in the last 2 or 3 months made this movie, and it is now on Shudder and getting very good reviews, which I think we will add to, which is Host. What did you think, Spencer? Since I know I was like, "Hey, you should watch this."
Yeah, holy crap. This was terrifying. And in a unique way, I would say that a lot of times there is value and it's worth arguing for the theatrical experience and seeing a film in a movie theater. But this is a film best experienced on a laptop with headphones on, by far. This is because the whole thing takes place inside of the app Zoom, which if you're if you're working right now, you are sadly all too familiar with.
Yes.
And it lulls you into not a false sense of security, but a real sense of realism, because you're looking at something that you do all day, every day that turns horrifying. So that I think is a unique psychological hook and an advantage that it has, where several times my mind was like, "Oh, I'm on a Zoom call with these people." Like I was making sure the background behind me was clear of stuff, because I really felt like I was connected with them in a way that watching a movie on my laptop never does. So I think that the premise and the execution of it was fantastic. It's short. It's a very simple premise of they start the seance and things go wrong from there. Something goes wrong. But I think that they still managed to keep it fresh and engaging and funny too. All the qualms you have about interacting with people online and being stuck on Zoom calls and the different dumb pranks people play on each other. I think they mine those for great laughs. And the scares were there. I mean, a little bit of a suspension of disbelief that people in that situation would still manage to have the presence of mind to take the camera with them and turn the camera on the thing that was terrifying them. I would not. I would just slam the laptop shut. But wow, how does this compare to other films in this genre? Because this was the first one I've seen like that.
The only other one that I've seen is Unfriended, which I actually heard the second one is good. I liked Unfriended. I'm in both cases. I went in very cynical, like, "Oh, this is so easy to think of the terrible version of this." And when I saw Unfriended, I remember being like, "Oh, this is going to feel like cheap and bad." And then I thought they did a good job there. I think I like this even more. And again, it was very, very easy for me to go in. I was hearing a lot of good buzz about it, but I still thought, wow, this is really tricky to pull off to make an effective horror movie at all, but also it could feel stilted or fake or whatnot. But yeah, he did a really good job as a director. I really want to give credit to the cast, who I think are all really good. And it makes sense to me that they're all they're professional actors who are also real life friends. because they do a very good job of, like, yeah, they establish this dynamic between them. It's a short movie, like you said, it's only like an hour, but they quickly let us know what it's like for them together. We'd get just enough of a hints of like, oh, they don't like that guy's girlfriend, or like this, like little things here.
Yeah, they did such a good job establishing the chemistry so quickly, so early.
Yeah.
And then the whatever stiltedness there may have been is ameliorated because they're on a Zoom call, and all social interactions over Zoom are a little bit stilted and a little bit like, no, you go. So that kind of is smoothed over any rough edges on acting or line reads or anything like that.
No, I totally agree. Like, yeah, it all works really well. And then I was also just very impressed technically with how they pulled it off. I mean, I will mention one thing. I'll mention that from like my article talking to him is, yeah, everyone's shot from their own home. But there are some impressive, like, especially given the circumstances, there are some impressive like effects or even stunt moments in this. And that was done like that. There are professional stunt people that were used in this movie, but they were editing things and changing things in a way that it wouldn't be obvious. There was also like, here, I don't want to give away exactly who or when this happens, but something happens with like someone being pulled in a chair. And that's because one of the actresses sent the director a video after he said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this concept. And it showed her in her chair and the chair being yanked because she's a real life climber and she's quarantining with her boyfriend and they had all this climbing equipment. And they figured out like, so it's just, I was really impressed. Like before I knew that, just watching it, I was like, oh, wow, this is really well done for what, especially given the circumstances it's made under. And then kind of figuring when I talked to him and, saw like all the work that went into it under these really tricky circumstances to make a movie that, is very effective, that works really well. I was really impressed by it. I watched it, by the way, during the day, and it's still great. I still like jumped. I still like had like about 3 or 4 times where I like really actually jumped and yelled out. And then I showed it to my wife and I knew it would scare the hell out of her. And it did. She did the like, why are you showing me this? I love it. I hate it reaction.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was making the window smaller and smaller as the movie went along.
Right.
And it's so good. Cause there's times when you think you've lost your connection or times when the volume gets up cause they're turning up their mic volume. They really play with it well. And it's a great example of necessity being the mother of invention, because this was more effective and more scary to me than, I don't know, The Conjuring. I'm trying to think of other larger budget horror movies. But and I know that's not the purpose of like a Hellraiser or something like that. It's a different type of scare. But this was so grounded in our current day, in our current reality, that it made a creepy time only creepier. So if that's the type of thing you're into, I think you got to see this one. It's on Shudder, which I signed up for a free trial for, and might have to keep it after this. I mean, there's good stuff on there, right, Eric?
There is. I might be talking about some of that good stuff soon. I also wanted to mention that I think found footage gets a bad rap because the same reason a lot of things that get copied quickly do. It's like because when found footage became a hit with like Blair Witch and stuff, there was a lot of people who instantly were like, we can do a cheap found footage movie. And of course that meant a lot of bad ones happened.
Yeah.
But when done right, it's really effective. Like the good Paranormal Activity movies, and there's some good, some bad, are very effective in the way they use it. And Rob Savage, it turns out, is like a big fan of found footage in general, which I think shows because he didn't treat this like I guess I'll do this because I have to. Like he, you can tell it was made by a filmmaker excited to do it. I did ask him like, is it a nod to Blair Witch that all the actresses use their real first name? He said it is. There's also another little reference in there of Blair Witch to look for. And I think it is a case of someone using found footage in general well, and then the specific idea of us trapped at home looking at our computer screens.
Bored, and like that seems like something that my friends I do like, oh, let's do a Zoom seance. That sounds cool.
Yes. But not after you watch this movie.
Nope. Doesn't sound cool anymore. Not gonna happen. All right, so we have some people chiming in on this. Devil Kazuya writes, sounds like Unfriended. And if it does, that's something I'll have to check out because I really like that.
Yeah, I mean, they're both good movies, by the way. Like, I think I ultimately like this one a little more, but that's not to say anything bad about Unfriended. Because like I said, I saw Unfriended incredibly cynical about that one. And that was like 5 years ago, thinking, oh, this is going to be really bad. And then it was like, oh, yeah, they did a good job there as well.
Prince of Poo Poo back writing, the most terrifying thing is that they're not using Discord instead. I can see them doing a gamer-based horror movie after this. this pick an app, we'll make a horror movie.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's the lesson that people might take from this if it is successful. I do think that this one's very specific to the time and place and the app of Zoom, frankly.
Yeah. It's so God. The world is brought to you by Zoom. So is horror.
Lisa Martini writes, sounds kind of fun, actually, though some of my professional Zoom calls in lockdown have already felt like horror movies.
Yes.
Yeah. And D.A. Baracus writes, not a horror film, but Searching with John Cho is a movie entirely on the computer screen. That's one that I will have to check out because I think that there is an Honest Trailers Easter egg in there, if I recall. Somebody told me that's like in a tab or something like that.
It might be, yeah. I like Searching a lot. Searching is sort of a little bit tricky because it is all done sort of real-time computer screen, but they also, like, the way they did it is like they shot a lot of places because he's watching news reports, and one time we're watching like security camera footage from places. So it's both contained and yet also bigger than something like this, which is literally just people talking to each other.
And that's something that I appreciated, but also couldn't help but notice about found footage films is when they break their own rules. Sometimes you have to. And this movie, I think, again, it was a stretch. It was a stretch of realism for them to hold on to the camera during this horrifying moment in their lives.
There are a couple of times where you're like, oh, they're walking down the hallway holding their laptop forward. I don't know about that.
They thought to like flip the screen around. Like, wow, that's good presence of mind. They must all be cinematographers or something like that. And like Chronicle or something like that, where it's found footage until it isn't. So that's, if you can get past that, I think you're in for a good time. Cheney D writes, if you have to be like a good actor to establish chemistry over Zoom, and they do. That makes a lot of sense. You telling me that they're actually friends and they all know each other. Because it was a very easy, relaxed vibe to begin with that felt like me hanging out with my friends until things happen.
Yeah, and they have a good vibe between them, and they do just enough to establish their personas without everyone saying my backstory is like. I even like that one of the five of them, it's UK based, they're all UK actresses, but one is American, which is because this one actress is American actress who studied in London and still lives there. But I like that. Like, it's like it doesn't have to be talked about. It doesn't have to be like, ever since you moved here from America, Haley. It's
which you wouldn't when you were talking to your friends, like, oh, you American. Like, if you actually chat on a regular basis, like, stuff like that doesn't come up, and you don't need to know. That didn't bother me at all. And finally, Marcus Y writes, neat, the horror movie based on the Quibi app next. I believe that's known as Quibi.
Right.
Or the what is it? The Sam Raimi has the golden arm.
It was that. Yeah, I can't remember what that show is called.
Like 50 States of Horror.
Something like that.
And each state has its horror movie, one of which is The Woman with the Golden Arm, and that's gone viral for all the wrong reasons. So yeah, I think the backstage at Quibi would be the Quibi horror movie.
It's Katzenberg's meetings, or the webcam. I should want to mention, by the way, because we were joking about this right before we started doing this, that there is the title Host is obviously a pretty generic title, and there's, to make it even more confusing, there's another 2020 movie called The Host. So this is just Host.
Oh, no. And then there is a Korean monster movie called The Host as well. Yeah. So make sure you're on Shudder looking for Host. 56 minutes, you're in, you're out, you're scared. So I think at the end of the day, these are two films that we would both heartily recommend, especially for the cost of $0 extra if you're already subscribing to these things.
If you're not subscribing, and like you said, like you can get a free trial for Shudder to watch it for a week. It's worth your time. And by the way, I'm not one of those people who is like, like these movies are like, I'm nothing against long movies. In fact, often I'm defending like, hey, this movie felt like you needed that 2.5 hours. But there is something to be said to knowing your movie doesn't need more time, and just being, and with both these films, one's just under 90, one is just under 60. It's like, yeah, this is neither of these needed to be longer. That is perfect for what they were doing. Yeah.
And in an age where, we're freed of those constraints because we're not tied into pods with commercial breaks anymore. And we're not tied into theaters with set times like that. So hopefully we'll see more films in these gray areas, or really it's a throwback when every movie used to be 90 minutes long. And how much more time do you need?
You're good.
Speaking of which, that's our time. Eric, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks
for chatting with me about two fun movies. I hope we get to do it again soon. And I hope we see you guys soon, because we will be here every day of the week, Monday through Friday, right here on SJU. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.